Awesome. So it's time to begin. Hello, everyone. A super warm welcome to all of you. Good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for choosing to spend 1 hour with us learning about BRSR Assurance on this beautiful Saturday evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. So, as you know, the agenda for today is a deep discussion on BRSR assurance. Today, we have two amazing experts from the industry who've come down to discuss about this topic. I'll start by introducing the two guests today, and not guests. So we will have Mr. Sriram Ganeshan, who would be the core speaker for today, and of course our partner Mr. Jayant Vishwanathan, who would be the moderator. This is a new format for us as well, right? We the good thing and the bad thing about sustainability is that it's a very, very, very vast topic, right? For us as a company as well, we find hard to kind of stay on top of most of topics, but we're lucky to have amazing partners such as Mr. Jayant Vishwanathan, who kind of supports us on complex topics such as BRSR assurance. So we really pulled him in. We're like, hey, please help us with this complex topic on BRSR assurance and help our partners, our audience, understanding and navigating through this topic. So he was more than ready to accept that, and we're really thankful. And I will quickly start by introducing the two guests we have today. So, firstly, Mr. Sriram Ganeshan, he is the Global Chief Commercial Officer at Redington Group. We've all heard of the Redington Group. It's one of the largest IT services and consulting company in the world. He has been with the company for more than 25 years, and Mr. Ganeshan leads global sales and business operations across India, Middle East, Africa, Turkey, and South Asia. That is a lot and lot of work. It seems like, yeah, he is also the global sustainability leader responsible for the group's ESG strategy, sustainability initiatives, and compliance. He's a chartered accountant by profession, and he previously served as the CFO for Redington in the Gulf region. Another thing I would love to announce is that Redington India was just very recently secured the 31st most sustainable companies in India for 2024. That's a very, very hard and a very complex what I might say award to achieve. So congratulations to the Redington Group. And then, of course, we also have Mr. Jayant Vishwanathan. He is the director at Akshayam Corporate Advisors. He has over 15 plus years of expertise in corporate compliance and governance. He's also worked with publicly listed companies, helping them with compliances in India and across the globe. And he, of course, specializes in corporate litigations and represents clients before various authorities such as NCLAT and NCLT, right? So I am so happy that we have the honor of having both of you join our webinar today, right? As mentioned before, the agenda for today is a very complex topic, which is very, very timely, called the BRSR assurance. Starting this financial year, I believe the top 50 companies have to have an assurance report in place, right? And assurance is a very complex topic. Like BRSR in and of itself is very complex, but having an assurance done on top of it adds to that complexity. So we wanted to hear from experts about, how we as companies can be on top of that. What are certain best practices they have carried out to ensure that that we have all the documentation ready, all our data ready before that assurance process happens, right? A little background about why we're doing this, right? As I mentioned, top 250 companies in the country have to mandatorily have an assurance done at the end of this financial year. Beyond that, it's a great best practice to happen to have in place, right? Today, SEBI has this regulation in place to ensure that companies do not do just stuff like greenwashing, right? And then all the data that they have in place is absolutely correct, complete, and just ready so that they are not they're not kind of lying to the stakeholders that they have, right? So we wanted to bring on these stakeholders to kind of discuss on what are the best practices they have in place to have this to kind of perform this entire activity. So without much further ado, I would love to invite Mr. Jan, Mr. Sriram to continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arushi, for the wonderful introduction. Once again, welcome you all to the webinar of Mastering BRSR Report Assurances, Strategies for Compliances and Reporting. It's such an honor for us to have Mr. Sriram Ganeshan, who's heading, in fact, the entire ESG and the sustainability part of it for Redington, which is again an $8.4 billion distribution and supply chain solution providers across the world with with presence in multiple countries and multiple continents. Thank you so much, sir. Before we jump into the list of questions, maybe we would love to hear from you a context-setting opening remark before we get into the webinar. Actually, sir, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jayant, and thank you, Arushi, for the kind introduction. Wish you all a very good afternoon. And as Arushi said, thank you for taking time on a Saturday afternoon, evening to be a part of this seminar. So as Arushi said, it's a very hot topic, a very vast topic, and one needs to dwell into it in multiple dimensions. But a larger context before we get into BRSR asset reporting as a mandate, I think it may be worthwhile to spend a couple of minutes to understand why this is important and what is the larger context. So if you look at sustainability, which is where BRSR is finally becoming a part of, as per the World Economic Forum, which does a global annual risk perception survey, 80% of the top 10 risks in about 10 years from now are expected to be all ESG linked. So which means the risk perception is actually real, it's not a perception. So we need to take active steps now to be able to manage our risks better with one clear responsibility, very simply put, to try to leave a reasonable planet for our children and subsequent generations. I'll just take a couple of more minutes to call out some statistics again, which will help us place sustainability in the larger context. If you look at the one planet Earth that we are living today, the ecological footprint that we are leaving as a human race on the planet is actually about 1.75 times the Earth, which means, in other words, by 2030, we would need 2 Earths to fulfill the demands of the natural resources. And by 2050, we would need 3 Earths to meet the requirement that our current generation has. And this is assuming we don't take definitive action. It may be worthwhile here to actually recall what Mahatma Gandhi very famously said: there's enough in the world to meet everybody's need, but not to meet everybody's greed. I think that's extremely important for us to place in context. And I'll just call out one more statistics in the current era of artificial intelligence technology evolution, which is absolutely galloping at a fast speed. In 2022, about 1.5% of the world's electricity consumption was from data centers. This is expected to increase by close to 160% over the next 5 years to about 2.5 to 2.6%. And ChatGPT, which is such a common name today, if we do one search on ChatGPT, it consumes 10 times more power than we would do on Google search. Again, a different way of putting it, one ChatGPT search consumes that much power, which can actually light up a bulb for 20 minutes. So we can see that our requirement of natural resources, the carbon footprint that each one of us leave, unknowingly or knowingly, is extremely significant. Hence, the concept of sustainability becomes very relevant so that each one of us as stakeholders have a responsibility to Mother Earth. Countries have taken targets. India has taken a target of having net zero by 2070 and many interim targets till that period. Corporates have taken targets and individuals have and should take targets. And in order to, I think, align the corporate interest with the larger global and national interests, regulators have stepped in. And SEBI very rightly had come up with the BRR, which got translated into BRSR subsequently, in order to regulate what the corporates are doing and how we can actually contribute to a better planet. I would also want to quote here the famous management guru, Peter Drucker, who says, "You cannot manage what you cannot measure." And if we take this as a fundamental mantra for us, for this session, then all of us will relate to the fact that unless we measure the ecological footprint, the social footprint, and multiple other dimensions of what we are doing as a corporate today, in order to be a responsible corporate citizen, we ought to measure, then take definitive actions to be able to go behind executing some of those. I would stop the context setting here and just say that BRSR is actually essential. Just like a financial statement provides the financial health of the company, BRSR provides a perspective on for sustainability health. And in other words, it actually provides a true cost of operations where we take the natural resources, availability and consumption for granted. So I think the larger message is it's not a form-filling exercise. It's not a simple exercise that's been mandated for regulatory purposes. That is something much more serious, much more fundamental that each one of us would embrace. Then if we do that, I think a lot of questions that are going to follow in the next half an hour or so will become a lot more clear. Sorry, Jan, for the long monologue, but I thought it's important to set the larger context so that we get the fundamentals right.
Absolutely, sir. Pleasure hearing you. And I think you beautifully set the context by bringing one line that said you cannot manage if you cannot measure. And I think that sums up the entire intention of why the entire reporting came. And from reporting, they've also moved to the BRSR core or the assurances where in our language, what we call in compliances is audit. So this sets the perfect context for us to move on to the questions. With your permission, could we proceed with the first question?
Please, Jan.
The way we will be conducting the webinar would be, there'll be a few interactions between the two of us, which will cover the topic at a larger level. And of course, we have the audience where again, Ms. Arushi will come back in and she'll take a few questions from the audience who'll be typing it in the chat box or as the case may be, which Arushi will explain. And you may give your views upon the queries that are raised by the wonderful audience who are present here. Yes.
Sure.
So given that you cannot manage when you cannot measure, could you explain what BRSR assurance regulation is and what is driving SEBI? Because ultimately in India, it is SEBI that is driving the BRSR reporting and the assurance. What is driving SEBI to emphasize compliances for companies?
So BRSR Assurance is fundamentally a subset of the BRSR, where I think beyond just reporting the numbers, one had to make sure that there's a certain amount of reliability that can be given to the data that is reported in the BRSR report. Because there is this fundamental 9 principles which are getting covered in this. And it's very important for the data to be accurate, because there are multiple decisions being taken. First, as a corporate, you set targets basis what the numbers are going to talk about. There's a credibility that we need to build in the stakeholders ecosystem amongst investors, among employees, among suppliers, among customers. So unless there is a certain credibility that is brought into the entire process, I think the emphasis and the value that one can get out of BRSR reporting would not be there. I think that's a fundamental premise with which SEBI has brought in the BRSR assurance, so that a kind of comfort can be placed on the data that is reported.
Perfect, sir. In your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges companies encounter when trying to ensure the compliances with both the BRSR reporting as well as the assurance?
So let me touch upon the assurance part first. I think most of us would be familiar with a financial audit. So I think just as we get prepared for a financial audit from having the base voucher to the final trial balance ready for getting reviewed by the auditors, that's the same level of comfort that we should provide to an external reviewer on the BRSR data points, which means that audit trail should be available right from the source document till the final document that forms the basis of the report. And I think fundamentally, Jain, the way to look at it is much of what is there in BRSR is actually non-standard data points from a standard ERP or a standard system perspective. While some of the large industrial houses and production units may have a part of them or a good part of them, but conceptually at a much larger level, if you take a very high level view, many of them are non-standard data points. And these could also pose complications when, it is multi-country, multi-location, multi-state, multi-language, and you can name it, everything and anything that goes into it. And the reason being, each country, each state, each province would actually use different measurement points and different units for reporting some of the data. Let's take on electricity. There would be some countries which report in kilowatt hour, some states which report in units, some in joules and whatnot. So how do you actually translate them into a standard unit and provide them is one other dimension that one needs to look at. So one is, as I said, many of them are not captured in a conventional ERP system. Two, there could be non-standard formats, very different conversion units. And to top it all, if you have a lack of expertise in the team that is handling this, because I think accounting, just as an example, is a fairly old profession, right? So many of the standards are specified, you get experienced people in the domain. So there's a lot that can be relied on people. But here, unless we have a team that has the expertise and has a dedicated focus, then sort of, it becomes a big challenge. And again, it's not that everybody understands it, everybody relates to it. Just like today, we are holding this seminar for awareness purposes. I think the corporates themselves need to do it so that every single stakeholder knows what the significance is. Otherwise, it becomes a mere data collating exercise, which can actually lead to misleading and wrong outcomes.
Absolutely, sir. I think as far as the non-standard data points capturing, especially when it is cross-country and cross-continent, and in fact, within India, cross-state is concerned, there are quite a bit of challenges on multiple points together. But just to add on, how important it is to equally have the data being very accurate, because given the past experiences, they initially made it mandatory only for a few listed companies, and then they made it more broader and made the BRSR reporting as such for the top 1,000 companies. And now they've slowly gotten the assurances for 250, 150, then making it 250, then making it 500. From a SEBI perspective, also they're looking to do the mandatory requirements over a period of time, so that they are able to give a bit of time for the corporates to set in. So with this being the case, I'm sure SEBI is also looking at the initial few years being a bit inaccurate data being captured, or there could be some data capturing that could be erroneous in terms of the understanding from one company to another company and one industry to another industry. Given this challenges that we are looking at, how important is having an accurate and the transparent data in BRSR assurances process? And from what we've seen, what are the common pitfalls that companies fall into when reporting in terms of the BRSRs?
Okay, so fundamentally, again, as we said in the beginning, what can be done, what can be acted upon is only what we can measure. And the fundamental challenge that we will face if the data is not accurate or is not meeting up to the requirements is we'll fall short on our commitments. We'll fall short on what action points we have agreed to do, we have opted to do, and we have obliged to do, in a way of speaking. So what happens is, with the misleading information, it will lead to wrong decision making. And more importantly, as I said, the reporting is being relied on by multiple stakeholders, by investors, by employees themselves, because today the current generation wants to work with sustainable companies or companies that have sustainable business practices. So there is a collateral effect that can happen if the data is actually misleading and not up to the requirements. Because fundamentally, if you look at it, these are commitments being made. And unless we keep all our data points assurance ready, irrespective of the SEBI mandate or not, I think we are not doing the right thing for ourselves, let alone to meet the assurance requirements of SEBI.
Perfect, sir. I think we are able to at least have a fair understanding as to how important it is to have an accurate and a transparent data in terms of the BRSR and the assurance process.
And so let me also interject you with one more point, Jayant. Even in our own context, in one of the lines of businesses that we have, our prospective customers are wanting to know what is our statement on sustainability. What are we doing about specific parameters? And they take it as a precondition to be able to award contracts or even get into a discussion for potential business. So as the ecosystem becomes more knowledgeable, becomes more evolved, automatically the kind of reliance that we have today on financial statements, if not the same level, but an acceptable level of reliance requirement on the BRSR statement would very soon follow, is my genuine belief. And we can see it happening as well. And just to give you one more example, of course, this is more an international example. We understood that one of the leading law firms would not get contract from a US company because they had not disclosed a few things from a sustainability standpoint. So while it is not BRSR, I'm just saying from a ecosystem impact on how valuable this information is to multiple stakeholders, it's very important to relate to that.
So it boils down to even to service providers and professionals like
absolutely.
chartered accountants and company secretaries over a period of time. So
absolutely.
Let's hope that the ecosystem thrives and we are able to have a more sustainable ecosystem across. So talking about your experience, sir, at Redington, the BRSR assurance is not yet made mandatory. But given that it is going to be made mandatory in the immediate next year or the year after that, how have your approaches been in terms of the BRSR reporting so far? And how are you getting yourself prepared for the assurances requirement? And are there any lessons or best practices that you have found helpful that you could share with us?
So, at a very minimum, Jayant, I think it's a corporate level commitment and not a particular team's commitment. And hence, what we have done at Redington is actually adopted a tiered approach to be able to address this fundamental point. Because today, the kind of importance that one will place to an accounting document, an accounting transaction, is not what would one get for a BRSR related data point. They would tend to ignore it out. Correct. So that's the challenge. So what we have done is we had a tiered approach, as I mentioned. The first is having a board level commitment. So we got the board engaged, and the board is fully sensitized of what the importance is. So we have the board fully aligned to what we should be doing as an organization from a sustainability and a reporting standpoint. So to me, that becomes a fundamental starting point as we go down the process. Once this is done, then we also get the board to commit to us on resources. Resources would mean in terms of time, in terms of people, and in terms of financial capital as well, to be able to put the required systems and processes in place. As we said in the earlier context, many of them are not captured today in the conventional sense of the word, right? So we need to be able to enable systems to be able to capture some of these data points. Then comes, of course, the third one is having a cross-departmental, cross-functional, cross-geo team. We are present in more than 30 countries across the globe. And you can imagine collecting about 10,000 plus data points is no mean task, right? So we need to make sure that everybody is sensitized at the same level, is aware of what the implications are and what not the implications are, to be able to get alignment across the board. And of course, we are also sort of putting a system in place, a dedicated system, which helps us capture an ESMS system, as they would call it, which helps us capture all of these parameters, including targets that we want to set and measuring the progress along the way as we go forward. And I must also say at Redington, we have an advantage in a way of speaking, because we have a shared service center, a captive shared service center that we've been operating for a few years. So we also managed to get the board to approve a dedicated team within the shared service center, which will focus on the reporting requirements. So this shared service center team, along with the regional, locational points of contact to be able to collect the data, is putting in place the systems and processes to collect the entire gamut of information required for BRSR. And as part of this, the fundamental thing that we have said is an audit trail to be maintained. So every single document has to get uploaded. If the document is not available, how do we make it available? As you said, at the moment, assurance is not a mandate for us, but it will soon be. So we are putting all this in place much ahead of schedule. And we also plan, if all goes well, to get a kind of an assurance done internally for us to make sure that we are on the right track and fill up any potential gaps that we may have. So when it comes to mandatory assurance requirement, we have nothing to worry about. So that sort of summarizes the approach that Redington is taking at a broad level.
Absolutely, sir. That's a phenomenal input that you're given in terms of each entity having a bit of a bandwidth in terms of the employees or a separate team which should potentially be interacting not just with that team, but also cross-departmental across various stakeholders so that they're able to collate. Now, just adding on to your earlier point in terms of the lack of expertise in terms of the knowledge specific to BRSR, at least within India. Now, how do you think that this is something that could be addressed, and what is the potential period that you're looking at, sir, given that the manpower under the ESG ecosystem becomes an important aspect, apart from, of course, which will lead to my next question, which is how are you looking at third-party assurances? So before that, if you could also give us an input as to how our organization like Redington is looking to recruit employees under the ESG team, if you could say that.
So as I said, the ESG specialist knowledge or the expertise is required, and the knowledge is not easy to come by in the marketplace. But we definitely want to have at least a small team, a finite team who has the expertise, who is able to do a training to all the employees concerned to collate the data points. 2 is in a position to review and validate the appropriateness of the data point that is being supplied. And 3 is also mandated to get the audit trail, as I said, maintained properly. So even though it could be a smaller team which has the expertise to be able to do this, this is where the shared service center comes in as a great help to us, so that one is able to optimize on the resources and get the work done, even though we are spread across multiple countries in a relatively efficient manner. But again, Jayant, that is easier said than done. We hope that we are able to do what we are setting out to do, and it is quite complex. It's quite complex. Even just as a case in point, to read an electricity bill from the Tamil Nadu government vis-a-vis a Maharashtra government is a big difference. So for the person to read it, interpret it, and update it in the system and make sure it doesn't go wrong is itself a task in itself. Absolutely. And we don't also actually capture some of the data points that we take for granted. Maybe I should have touched upon it earlier. Example, groundwater consumption. There are many companies that consume groundwater and don't have a measuring mechanism to see what is consumed. So when there is no measuring mechanism, how do you even record the data point, right? So we need to go one step back, install a measuring mechanism, and that could need some investment. Of course, this could be a small investment, but conceptually, I'm just saying. So each of these data points has to get evaluated in terms of what we have, what we don't have. And that's why we need to work much ahead of schedule, much ahead of it becoming mandatory, make sure that we are just ready when we are required to be ready.
Absolutely, sir. So one thing is very crystal clear that is being coming across as part of this webinar is, you cannot have this as just as a reporting mechanism at the end of the year. Rather, this is an exercise that goes throughout the year, and it starts from 1st April of every year, and not just a reporting mechanism that is from the April of the subsequent year in terms of just looking at the reporting.
Yeah, I would take it in one step back, Jayant. Fix the sustainability responsibility for the company. Get the board aligned to it. Then everything follows. So then it doesn't become a fiscal year to fiscal year issue. It actually becomes an ongoing commitment that we have to these stakeholders. In fact, I would take one step further and say, it's my personal opinion though, we don't look at an employee as an annual contract, right? You can look at an employee as an ongoing resource, a valuable resource for the company. So just like that, if we have an employee as a valuable resource, I think BRSR is also a valuable thing that is an ongoing process and doesn't run fiscal to fiscal. It so happens that we need to report on a fiscal basis from a regulatory standpoint, but the concept is much more than an annual exercise. It's a much more larger cost that we need to work for.
Absolutely, sir. And I think you perfectly put it across that it has to flow from the board so that the context is set from there as part of each of the organization. Thank you so much, sir. And moving on with our questions, when companies are selecting a third-party assurance providers for their BRSR reporting, what factors should they be paying close attention to?
Yeah, I think SEBI has also answered this well by saying they are not looking at a particular profession, it's profession agnostic, but they want to make sure the management is comfortable that the assurance provider has the necessary expertise to do so. I think that's the best way to put it. One needs to make sure that the company has an expertise to do so. But again, I would go one step further and say they need to first understand the company's business, because we can't straitjacket multiple scenarios into the company and end up reporting whatever has to get reported, right? It has to be related to the company's business operations And there could be a bit of advisory service also required, the way we are doing it. Is there a better way to do it? So one needs to understand the business. So the assurance service provider has to be somebody who has the right expertise in the industry, understand the business, has worked on similar assignment, especially large-scale assignments involving multiple geos, multiple locations, and fundamentally is having a good track record of making sure that there have been assurance statements given in the past, maybe in different context, but at least from a broader perspective on sustainability related aspects, and don't look at it as a financial number. The minute you look at it as a financial number, I think we are losing the larger perspective.
Absolutely. I think you put it across very beautifully that it is professional agnostic. They never said that only a chartered accountant or a professional who's qualified under a specific regime has to go give a sustainability or the assurance reporting. Now, when it comes to the agnostic, it being professional agnostic, the next question that will automatically come is, as far as industries are concerned, are we looking at third-party assurance providers being industry specific? Because today you will not find a chartered accountant within a chartered accountant firm. There'll be multiple teams maybe who are industry specific, but a chartered accountancy firm will still be considered as a chartered accountancy firm. But when it comes to these BRSR reporting, given that and the assurance reporting, given that you say that they will have to not just be coming and reporting at the end of the year, but they will have to travel along with, understand the company's policies, the principles, and then look at it. Would it become industry specific third-party assurance providers over a period of time, or would you still feel that it would evolve over a period of time? And if so, how will it evolve?
My personal opinion is it may not be industry specific. As long as we have the right set of people who are able to understand the concept, I think one should be able to do it. I think that is true for any profession. While today I agree it's an era of specialization, I think from a sustainability reporting standpoint, we are still in early stages. So it may be very difficult to, or even not necessary to have that level of industry specific expertise for every single sector. I think as long as the team is in a position to relate to the business, relate to the sector, and has relevant expertise in doing assignments in that sector, not necessarily BRSR assurance, I think one should be able to do it well, is my personal opinion.
Absolutely. Perfect, sir. Thanks a lot. Coming to the next question, since BRSR as such is still relatively new and the regulations are continuing to evolve, especially around the assurances and the core, how do you think companies can adopt and stay compliant and ahead of the curves?
Sorry, it'll be a bit of a repetition, Jayant, but honestly, staying compliant has to come in the way the process is defined itself. So which means as long as the company has taken the responsibility, look, it is an accountability that we have to the stakeholders, and we're only reporting what we ought to be reporting, compliance will start from there. As I say, compliance starts at home. So I think that agenda is very important to drive compliance. And once you set the process going, everything will fall in place. So what I mean is, once there is a commitment, investing the resources as we discussed, setting the process in place, having the right teams with the right expertise, having the assurance, then it becomes a very routine affair, which requires it to have the right requisite focus. I think the fundamental point is, are all management of the companies serious enough on this topic? Do they see it again as a regulatory requirement to be ticked off, a tick in the box, or is something much more beyond that? I think that will set the tone of the compliance as we go forward. Once all the basics are set in the manner that we articulated across the various points that we discussed, I think that's extremely important. But again, as it is a evolving subject, we need to have the right resources, take part in industry forums, engage the value chain to understand what is happening on their side. We need to have that kind of an approach to it. Example, I was in a restaurant a couple of days back. They had deliberately filled only half the water bottle. And the reason is they said, we don't want to waste water. If you want it to be topped up, please let us know, we will do it. So these are small things, and it may not be relevant from BRSR perspective. But what I'm saying is, it was actually ooze in your blood, that, these are important concepts for us. And that will only drive compliance. Otherwise, you'll always be chasing compliance with a stick. It doesn't work. The company has to be compliant. They have to imbibe the principles of BRSR in what they do. They have to speak what they want to do. They have to walk the talk, and then compliance will follow. It doesn't sound theoretical, but it's actually practical. One needs to be able to go down that path. If the
Absolutely.
foundations are well laid, has the support of the leadership, then compliance to me will become quite natural, quite normal. It's only when there are difference of opinion, there's misalignment, then there'll be multiple creepages that come in that may potentially compromise on compliance.
Super. In fact, as you rightly put across, very recently I attended a meeting where gone are those days where we used to have the small plastic bottles. Now it has moved to glass, and you have all the glass bottles that are kept so that the plastics are avoided as much as possible. Ultimately, sir, as far as large entities like Redington is concerned, I'm moving on to my last question before we take some queries from the audience. As far as large companies like Redington is concerned, looking at aligning your BRSR goals could be easier internally. But when it comes to a little bit of external, say, for example, your supply chain partners and your other stakeholders are concerned, aligning them into your BRSR goals, especially when it comes to the upcoming assurance requirements. Any views on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Jayant. Value chain is a big question mark. It's a big debate that has to get addressed very carefully. For us while of course SEBI's final outcome is awaited on what they're going to talk, how they're going to define the value chain requirements. For us at Redington, if you look at upstream and downstream as two categories of the value chain, upstream we deal with some of the global tech majors, the Apple, the Dell, the Microsoft, Cisco's. We deal with about 200 plus global vendors, HP, and whatnot. And many of them are very high in the maturity curve on ESG and sustainability. And in fact, the recent Apple's iPhone 16 launch that happened a couple of weeks back, they actually come up with a carbon statement, a sustainability statement on the product itself. How much of it is from recycled material, how much power does it consume, and a whole lot. It's actually a 5-6 page report if I recall. So extremely high on the maturity curve on sustainability. And I'm sure many of you would have also seen ads of Apple and many other large vendors which are there. So upstream, while we have not yet started collaborating with them specifically on integrating the data points, pending clarification from SEBI, I personally feel that will be a slightly easier one to handle. Downstream, we'll have to work through because we deal with about 20,000 people across the regions that we cover, right? 20,000 resellers that we cover. And again, we could be dealing with very large players. We could also be dealing with not so large players with very different systems in place, very different approaches to sustainability. So that is something that we'll have to work through, Giant. I must say, we're waiting for the regulations to come so that we are able to narrow down the focus on specific people we need to target. Otherwise, we can't be painting the entire town with one single brush. So we are holding on to it. It'll be not so easy, I guess, but we should be able to manage it on the downstream as well. But it's early stages.
Absolutely. Early stages as far as the supply chain and downstream and concerned and the value chain is concerned. But yes, we certainly are looking forward to Redington setting up the benchmark in terms of the ESG in the supply chain industry. Sir, thank you so much for taking a few queries from us. Arushi and others can also pitch in. Arushi, if you could take the queries from the audience and post it to our wonderful Sriram Ganeshan, sir, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think all of us learns a lot through this entire interaction. I believe one question that I've got personally is that, and Mr. Ganeshan, how do you upgrade your team, right? I think number one, BRSR is a new concept for the sustainability team in general. Secondly, there are very few companies out there who actually have a sustainability team to begin with, right? And thirdly, assurance is a very new process, right? So if there are folks out there among us who are not maybe part of the sustainability leadership, right, but they are part of the sustainability teams, number one, they have limited knowledge on the topic. Secondly, maybe today assurance is not mandatory for them, but they do want to prepare for it in the future, right? So any advice for such kind of folks on how they can start preparing?
I think we've been lucky, Arushi, to have the management buy-in at an early stage on what we should be investing in and why we should be investing in. So at least having a couple of team members who are well experienced in this really makes a difference. It's not that these are extremely different, difficult concepts to understand, but I think they are definitely one step away from our traditional thought process. That realization must be there, and we should at least identify a set of individuals, if not take them from an external environment, identify a couple of individuals who are fully asked to be focused on it, attend training programs, read the regulation, understand how it can relate to the company, and build on it. Fundamentally, it's dedicated focus. If you're able to get dedicated focus internally, it's good. It's one way to address it. The other way to address it, to be a bit faster on the timeline, to be able to accelerate on your journey, is to actually get somebody who's worked on this earlier and take their help to be able to work with the internal team on this. So I think that focus is very important, and focus will come only from realizing the importance. And that's where I feel a management commitment, a board commitment is extremely important to get it rolling.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Another question that Alok posed in the chat is that, and again, while it is not relevant to BRSR assurance, it's still a very important question, right? And of course, I'm more than happy to support you in answering this. What he says is that, what is the difference between BRSR core as a concept and value chain reporting, right? He'd love you to share any thoughts that you have on the subject.
Sure. Maybe I'll just give a quick perspective, and Arushi, as you said, you could also supplement. So the BRSR core, essentially, the way it commonly understood, the way it's understood is applicable to the company. So that's what we are reporting for the operations of the organization itself. But when it comes to value chain, it actually takes into account our suppliers on the upstream, our customers on the downstream, and we are required to report on these parameters for them as well as to what they are doing for the respective businesses. So which means we are trying to present a holistic picture on the ecological footprint or the carbon footprint that we, from end to end, in order to serve a product or make a service render to a customer, to be recorded and made visible to all stakeholders. So that's the fundamental difference. So we go beyond our company's operations into our customers and our vendors as well. Arushi, over to you. You may want to supplement it.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much. And yes, adding to that, right? So as per the SEBI regulation right now, I think SEBI has mandated that publicly listed companies, I think the top 250 again, mandatorily have to collect data from their value chain partners, and this is from maybe the top 75% by their spend. They need to collect data on their sustainability performance basis the BRSR core format, right? And I'm more than happy to share this format with you at the end of this conversation, but as per the BRSR core format, right? But I think just as Sir said, that value chain sustainability is a whole bigger concept, right? And again, when we start working with companies, we try to understand what is their requirement and why do they get embarked on this whole value chain sustainability process, right? It's not always regulatory driven. Sometimes they have customers pushing them to, get data in place from a value chain sustainability perspective. Sometimes they have investors pushing them. Sometimes they have bankers pushing them, right? So we really try to understand that, okay, that who are the stakeholders that care about your value chain data, and according to that we determine what are the assessments they need to collect from their value chain partners. Then we try to understand that, okay, what is the bare minimum we can do, right? And the bare minimum is a good idea, because value chain is a very large concept, right? Most companies today have from like all the way to like thousands and 10,000 of partners across the entire globe, right? So it's very important to understand what are the concepts we want to engage them on. And like today, if we're fairly matured and we want to collect scope 3 data from them, let's just maybe do that. If you want to collect data on multiple other aspects like human rights, EHS, etc., maybe let's do that, right? But you have to understand that suppliers are not suppliers don't have that much budget as we do. The suppliers do not have that much capability as we do. The suppliers do not have that much understanding of sustainability as we do. Right. So we might want to ease them into this process. And that's why the best way to implement supply chain sustainability is in a slow and steady way. Right. And of course, we are collecting data from them, but there has to be a big component of educating them on why we're doing this. What is our end goal with this? Right. So that becomes very important. Right. But
Arushi,
basically, yeah.
just to supplement that, Arushi, what the SEBI's consultative paper has finally left us with at the moment, till the time the final decision is done, is because it's going to be a vast universe, they are trying to limit it to people who are contributing 2% by value of purchases and sales. So that, and of course, with the 75% threshold, so that it gets kind of moderated in terms of the number of people that we need to cover in our value chain reporting. So hopefully, once the clarity comes in, as you said, even though it's a vast universe, multiple touch points, we should be able to narrow down and try to work around it. But of course, it's not going to be easy, as I said earlier.
Of course. One last question, and I believe we're almost towards the end of our webinar, is also that Poona asked, right, that in most organizations, we see that employees that have a financial background getting into the entire sustainability process, right? Now there again, the responsibility of BRSR reporting and assurance falls on their shoulder, right? So any advice for these employees that how can they kind of develop that lens of sustainability? How can they develop that lens of assurance to kind of better cater to their job as well?
I would say, Arushi, I'm myself a finance professional, being largely a CFO all my career. But I think the point is to be able to have that the curiosity to learn, to go through. There's a lot of material available on this, right from the recently introduced IFRS on this subject, IAS as they call it, to a whole lot of material. I think one needs to get only trained, be aware, but make sure there is enough time available to be able to focus on this. As I said multiple times in the conversation, what is required for this is it's a new topic. It's not just the knowledge, it's the time to be able to focus this. So it cannot be an also ran activity. It's actually quite an intensive activity. So that level of focus, now I don't really worry whether it's a finance professional or an engineering professional who wants to get into this. I think it's more having the right knowledge by training, by learning, by reading. But importantly, the time to be able to apply this to the reality and the ground situation. I think both are very equally important. I don't think the background per se should be a limiting factor. Even from an assurance standpoint, we saw SEBI is also clearly saying there's professional agnostic, right? So obviously, quite open, even from an assurance standpoint, to non-chartered accountant, non-financial professionals providing the assurance on this. So which means it's not really a profession. It's more having the right focus and ability to put the focus on.
Absolutely. Just adding on to your point, sir. In fact, my recent interaction with a very large college in Chennai, there is a separate chapter that they are looking at because they are a deemed college. They're looking at a separate chapter and a BCom ESG over a period of time that they will be working towards. So I'm sure in matter of time, we will have a lot of professionals who will be there. And of course, the system will groom people into moving more towards ESG, but definitely, as rightly put across during his context setting, that ESG is going to be the most important problem that is to be addressed by each of the entities over the next decade or so.
Thank you so much. I think someone just sent me a personal message on exactly this question, and this one is directed to both of you, right? Like today, if you were very early on your career journey, right? Like say 1 to 2 years of just finance experience and that lens, right? And now you've decided that, okay, I do want to pursue a career in ESG. Where would you start, right? What would you learn? How would you go about getting that experience in an organization, right? Because even for your company, right? For them to trust you with this, it takes some bit of credibility that you have to project, right? So would love to learn from both of you how you would go about if you were this young professional who's looking and making a career shift from finance to ESG. What would you go about doing?
So, Jayant, do you want to go first?
Oh, yes, I would love to. In fact, given that I've been closely interacting with a few students who are, very keen in understanding how they could build their career in ESGs and sustainability. See, one clarity that each one has to get is this is at a very, very, very nuanced stage. Will they have all the reporting set in place? The answer to that is a no. Like, for example, it is very easy because to get into a finance department or an accounting department, because everything is set, the softwares are set, the models are set, users have to follow what is there as a precedence. Whereas when it comes to this, there is no precedence that is there as such, except for a few reporting models that are there in place. So, for example, a large corporate like Redington has a separate team. The initial thing that they'll have to do is get into the team, understand the entire policies, understand the culture that is being set in terms of the ESG, and then move into the ESG as a full-fledged career is what I would suggest. In fact, we have one of the participants, if I'm right, who's also was part of our firm and now currently part of the ESG team in Redington, who's there. And every interaction with her gives us a lot of perspective as to how the organization is looking at ESG and what is the ways in which the ESG reporting is being mapped into. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jayant. Arushi, to me, it's actually a non-BRSR, non-sustainability question. I think as long as any new initiative within the organization has the management buy-in and has the requisite support, then transitioning to that role, I think, is only left to the individual's capabilities and interests. It could be sustainability today, it could be something else tomorrow. If that is a mandate, if the organization feels an important path to pursue for themselves, and they have the confidence as the individual has the ability to learn, stay hungry, stay foolish, to quote Steve Jobs, get into the tricks of the trade, do well. I think that's absolutely fundamental. I don't think it's specific to ESG or whatever. That's my view. Anything can be done as long as the management think it's important. They are able to support you. Could be with the training. It could be to send you for an external training program. Could be to support with that extra resource. Could be to support you the junior resource who is well experienced where you learn together. It could be multiple ways. But it fundamentally means an individual has the ability to learn and the management has the need to be able to drive the agenda forward. I think both of this will blend together in any context.
Perfect.
Got it. Thank you so much. And I believe one last question, which Rohit has asked, that has SEBI mandated to deploy, AA 1000 assurance standard, etc. He's Rohit has taken the effort of naming a bunch of reporting standards. I think my quick response is that I think today SEBI stance on this is not very accurate, right? But I would love to actually pull in both of you to talk about that. Okay, is there any standard that has been recommended by SEBI? And then again, how for a company that's really early on their journey with this, how do they start thinking about, okay, which is like the standard they should start complying with and which they should not comply with, etc.
I think SEBI has only specified 3 standards. One is the International Standard on Accounting Engagements 3000. Similarly, there's one on the ICAI as well, and one on the Sustainability Reporting Standards for ICAI 3410, if you recall. Apart from this, to my knowledge, Jayant is an expert, so he'll be able to clarify whether any of the other standards are also covered. We also went through a few of the reports, but yeah, these are the only ones covered. Sorry, Jayant, over to you.
Sorry, there are multiple committees that they've set across each of the institutes, right from ICSI Institute, the ICAI Institute, where they are working on the standards to bring it into a particular model. But currently, whatever are the standards that you had pointed out are there, as far as my knowledge goes also.
Yeah,
it's evolving, so we shouldn't be surprised if any new standards come up.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. Like as Mr. Ganeshan and even Jan mentioned, right? I think sustainability as a concept is evolving, and not only in India. Actually, I would say I've been around multiple geographies, and India is actually one of the most advanced when it comes to the implementation from a regulatory perspective and from other perspectives as well, right? So I think so many times when I'm speaking to a potential customer who's in the Middle East region and even in the US region, right? And when we're kind of quoting about the work that we've done with an Indian company, it feels really proud, right? That yes, right, it's not only BRSR related, it's actually from like an initiative perspective. There's a lot of work Indian companies are doing, which which is amazing and very just very proud for me to talk about. So I think yeah, I think after Europe. I believe India is one of the leaders in terms of the implementation and as a success story when it comes to corporate sustainability, right? So yeah, that's an interesting aspect as well. That being said, I believe we've answered most of the questions, right? If there is anything else, please feel free to write to me or Rasagul. We're more than happy to kind of take it up. We'll kind of collate all of these and send it to our host and participants today to see if we can get their feedback and we'll write back to you. But that being said, thank you so much, everyone. It's actually very interesting that all of us got together on a Saturday to discuss a topic like BRSR Assurance. And thank you so much for giving us this 1 hour of your time. And a special thank you to Mr. Ganeshan and Mr. Jayant. Thank you so much for taking us through this. I think same, right? Like as an outsider, it seems like a very laborious process, like assurance, audit, what is all this, right? But you really kind of narrowed it down, eased it out for all of us. Thank you so much. Yes, I will be sharing the recording with everyone at the end of this call. And yeah, of course, send us all your questions. But thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today.
Thank you all for giving the opportunity, and thank you everyone for participating. Thanks, Jayan, for this very insightful question.
Absolutely. You've been wonderful in terms of answering. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you,
Thank
Arushi.
you. Good day.
Bye-bye. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Yes.